to tell you this, but I'm flying over the woods and somebody told me, look down there, just like that. Just like that. My name is Kirk John, and I was born in Coatesville and went to Coatesville High School and never went to college. But after I got out of high school, I had the electrical course and became an electric welder down at Lukenweld, and kept getting better. Got to be first class qualified, Navy qualified welder. And I was doing that when the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor. It was on a Sunday, and they called us from the work and come over to listen to the radio and told about the airplanes, what they were doing to the Pearl Harbor, to the boats and all. So from then on, I could have had deferment to stay welding, but I felt a need to get into the service. I always wanted to fly since I was a boy, about 11 or 12 years old. And I wanted to go to West Point and then go into the Air Force. I finally decided to go into the service. I went down to Philadelphia and joined up to the Air Force, and they gave me a physical to see if I could qualify, and I did, especially the eyesight. When they had a guy there with a depth perception, you know, and he got it messed up. He says, bring him even. So I brought him even, and he messed it up. He says, bring him even. I brought him even. He messed him up. He said it the third time. He says, I'll be damned. He says, I haven't seen that good for a long time. So I got right into the Air Force. I was born in 1919, and in the 20s, there weren't very many airplanes around. And when one did fly over our place in Coatesville, I would rush out the door, almost knock it down to get to see it. And I'd watch it till it got out of sight. But we only maybe had one a week, maybe two at the most. But I really wanted to get into flying. When I was 14, they had a Ford Trimotor come into the Coatesville Airport and was taking people up for a penny a pound. And I heard about it, and I wanted my dad or mother to take me up and go up with me. Neither one of them wanted to go up in the plane, but they took me up and left me fly. So I flew, and what they did, they took off Coatesville Airport to the west, circled around out over Lukens and back up and landed. And it was a penny a pound, and I got it for 48 cents. I think I was 48 pounds. Loved it. And more than I wanted to fly. And I'd go up to the airport every time I had a chance just to see the airplanes. It was in 1942 and in September, but I don't know the exact date. Toward the end of September 42 is when I went down to Philadelphia and enlisted. I had to go to all the different flight schools. Well, first of all, went down to pre-flight at Virginia, at one of the fields in Virginia, forget the name of it. And I was there for a couple of months at pre-flight. And then I went to Florida to get the primary. I flew primary down there at Arcadia, Florida. And then I went to basic up in Georgia, at Bainbridge, Georgia, and flew the, we called the Volt-T vibrator. I don't know what its real name was. That's what we called it. And then I went down to Florida again, to not Pensacola. What's the name of the place? Anyway, and there I flew the AT-6 Texan. Did you ever hear one of them? That's a little brother to the Mustang. It's made by the same North American Air Company. Okay. And it flew nice. I loved that little AT-6. And it was the first plane I had with a landing gear that came up and a prop pitch that you changed. And it was getting me ready for the P-40 Warhawk that I flew for my overseas combat training. Never got close to a P-51. I saw one fly over a couple times down in Florida, but I never got close to one until in England. When I got to the base where I was assigned to fly out of, and I walked up to it, and man, I fell in love with it right away. It was a beautiful plane to look at, and it was a beautiful plane to fly. It really was. They sent me to New Jersey, to the water's edge there, and I spent a day there, not allowed to call anybody on the phone, not allowed to send a telegram or nothing. The next morning, they put us on a small boat and went across to the New York side, which is only a small distance, about less than a half a mile, and pulled up alongside the Queen Mary. We got off of that thing, got on the Queen Mary. 2 o'clock in the morning, Queen Mary slid out of its place, went down along. They didn't, no horn blowing, no people playing games or any, nothing. Nobody knew we were leaving, 2 o'clock in the morning. And we went down past the Statue of Liberty. They made us stay below they wouldn't let us up on to see the Statue of Liberty even. And they didn't want anybody to know who was on board. So we all boarded between midnight and 2 o'clock. It took us, we left at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it took us the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And the next day we got up and looked out, and we were anchored in the Firth of the Clyde River up in Scotland. And there were some other major boats around us. There was a couple destroyers, and there was one aircraft carrier, and the Queen Mary, and some smaller boats. And we got off the Queen Mary and got onto a small boat, and they took us up the Clyde River to Glasgow and left us off there. And I spent one night in Glasgow, and the next day they took us over to the other side of the river and put us on a train, and the train took us down to my air base where I was assigned to go. When they assigned the first plane to me, a fella had just reached R&R, retirement and recreation, went back to the stateside, and they gave me his plane, and he had named it Crazy Kid. That was the name of the plane. And that's the one I had for first 10 missions. And that's the one I got shot down in and crash landed. And then they gave me another brand new P51D. All these were Ds with a bubble canopy. And I flew it for 20 missions. And I was off one day, and another guy was flying it, and he got shot down and killed. They gave me the third P51, and I had it when war ended. I was flying a squadron commander's wing because I was a new combat pilot. And we had escorted bombers. That was our main job, escorting the bombers to the bomb run and picking them up after the bomb run and bringing them back to friendly territory. By that time, see, the 9th Air Force had moved over into Belgium, Holland, and France, and were on here, and the Germans had retreated back towards Germany. So we had some land in here that we called friendly territory. We had done all that, and we had gone in and strafed different things and shot up different things. And turned around. We were heading home to England, and we were late in the afternoon, and at the bit, the wingman of the element leader called out, "Bogies, 430 low." And I looked back over my starboard wing and looked down. We were at about 18,000 feet, and looked down, and at about 3,000 or 4,000 feet was a lot of airplanes low, flying back into Germany. And so Eldon Rigetti, our colonel and flight squadron leader, he said, "Prepare to bounce." And he gave me a 3-second peel over. He peeled over and went down. 3 seconds later, I peeled over and went down. Then the element leader, and then his wingman, and the 4 of us went down, and we went in on those planes, and the back ones, we knocked all 4 of them off, right? They didn't even know we were there, and we destroyed all 4 in the back. So that was my first shooting at a plane. And then if we, at the speed we were going, if we hadn't done anything, would have been out in front of the rest of them shortly. So as soon as we got done shooting the back ones, we cut our throttles and we went up and did what we call high wing over, almost like a loop, and came back around again. And by that time, they had gone in different directions, and there was 2 out in front of us. And Rigetti decided to take the one going to the left, and one went over to the right. So we followed that one to the left, and we kept cutting him off and cutting him off and cutting him off. And Rigetti fired a couple times. He saw the tracers going out right in front of the guy's plane, and he saw it. So he decided it was time to get out of there. So he did a sharp turn to the right, and he had a high-speed stall and crashed into the ground. So we didn't even shoot him. We came around and took a picture of him burning on the ground. So we got 5 planes that day, and didn't have a shot fired at us. That was my 4th mission. Well, the day I got shot down was January the 7th, 1945. Squadron commander told me to go down and strafe an airfield in the Ruhr Valley. That was part of Germany. So I went down, and I was at about 12,000 feet or so, and I went down and come in low so they wouldn't know I was coming in to the airfield. And when I first, I was going real fast, I guess about 500 mile an hour, when I come in sight of a plane sitting at the on the runway ready to take off, and it was about 1,000 feet out in front of me. I opened fire, and I knew I was hitting him. I saw the tracer bullets going right into the wing and the fuselage, and I flew right on. And by the time I get in there to that, I got right about where he was, and he blew up, and he flipped me up on my port wing. And here I am down near the ground level. I was down below the rooftops, because that's the safest place to fly, between the top of the buildings and the ground. And here I am. I thought my port wing was going to hit the ground, and I called on the Lord to get me straightened out, and we got the plane back over, and I'm flying right toward the hangar, and there's another plane sitting there, and I shot it up and pulled up over the hangar and went out across toward the woods. I hadn't had a shot fired at me that I knew of, and I went out over that woods. You might not believe me when I tell you this, but I'm flying over the woods, and somebody told me, "Look down there," just like that. Just like that. I looked down there, and right in front of my front end of my port wing, I looked and I saw Germans kneeling down around a machine gun nest up in the top of the trees. 2 seconds later, I looked back at the trailing edge, and I saw them jumping up and getting on the guns. So I did a quick 180, right straight back, and went back toward the field where I just strafed. And boy, those tracer bullets were flying over me. It looked like the 4th of July. Hundreds of them, tracer bullets going, but they weren't hitting me. And it was just because I got the warning from upstairs. The Lord, God, or an angel, or somebody told me to look down there, just like that. So I flew down along the airfield that I had just strafed, a mile or two. And then I turned back to the west again, and I went over and I hit that same woods. And I gave it the power to go up over the woods. And when I gave it the power to go up over there, oil come back all over my windscreen. Black oil. Cut my view off entirely to the front. And I could see nothing. So I wound the canopy back and looked out the sides. And here I am down treetop level, oil all over my windscreen. I didn't know how far the engine was going to take me or what would be. And I looked down at my temperature gauge on the oil, and it was all right. And I prayed that I'd get up to 5,000 feet, because the way you had to get out of a Mustang, you had to disconnect your oxygen, your radio, and all the stuff, your seat belt and everything. And you had to have 4,000 or 5,000 feet. You rolled over and fell out of them. That's the way you bailed out. You didn't have something to pop you out or anything like that, like they do today. And so I prayed that I'd get up to 5,000 feet, and I did. And when I got up there, I didn't want to bail out, and the engine was still running, so I thought, well, I'll wait till the engine starts to quit, then I'll bail out. So I flew for about 6 or 7 minutes, and the engine started running rough. And I still didn't want to bail out. So I looked around, and I was flying up a old country road that I had been following for a little while. And I looked over some trees, and over here was a nice big field. And I thought, boy, I could crash down in that easy. And it was on January the 7th, 1945, and there was about 7 or 8 inches of snow on the ground. And that was good, because the scoop under the Mustang acted like a plow if you landed on a dirt field. But I landed on that snow, and I slid out across there like I was in a sled or a snowmobile or something for about, I guess 50 yards or something like that. And as soon as the plane stopped, I jumped out of it and went back away from it and stood there and looked at it for about 15, 20 minutes. Nothing happened, didn't catch on fire, didn't blow up. So what am I going to do? Where am I? Am I in German occupied? Am I in Allied occupation? Air? Yeah. Or is a farmer going to come and tell me about crashing in his field? I didn't know. I didn't see anybody. Didn't know where it was. And I looked around at the bit and saw 3 people standing back there at that tree line that I'd come over before I crash landed. And I started to walk back toward them, and they disappeared. So I turned around, walked back to the plane, took off my Mae West and threw it in the cockpit, took off my parachute, threw it in the cockpit, took off my dinghy, that's the rubber boat that, in case we went down in the water, threw it in the cockpit, walked away from the plane again. Stood around another half hour, I guess, didn't know what to do, which way to go, or didn't see anybody. I didn't know what I was going to do. Didn't know where to start to walk. And after a long period of time, I looked back and saw one person standing where the 3 had been. So I went back toward that one person, and they stayed there. And when I got back to it, it was about an 18-year-old girl. And I went up to her and I said, "Americano." And she says, "Yeah." And I says, "Where's Germans?" She pointed to the east and she said, 20 kilometers. That's all she ever said to me. And I found out later on that 20 kilometers was 8 mile. I didn't know it at the time. I thought it was 20 mile. So I thought I got 20 mile over out of Germany, but I didn't. I only got about 6 or 7 mile over the Battle of the Bulge Lines, is where I crash landed. But if I'd have bailed out the first place, I'd have still been in German occupied. If I'd have bailed out, well, it'd been all right. The second place I'd have landed near that field I crash landed in. And so what am I going to do? So she couldn't talk to me, I couldn't talk to her. And I waited around there a while for her and with her, but we weren't talking. After about a horse and wagon come up that country road that I had been following, and come right by, and she stopped him, and she talked to him, and he motioned for me to come and get in. So I went over and got in the, it was an open wagon with beer barrels that looked like to me in the back. And he took me about 2 miles up that country road to an Autobahn and stopped and motioned for me to get off. So I got off, and he went across the Autobahn and on up the country road on the other side. And I stood there for about an hour. No traffic at all on that Autobahn, nothing. You'd think there'd be all kind of traffic on it. Nothing went by. Finally, maybe it wasn't an hour, but it seemed like an hour to me, a GI truck came by and picked me up. And here he was from the 9th Air Force Base, 40 miles below Brussels, Belgium. And he told me I was in Belgium, and he took me to a 9th Air Force Base up towards Brussels and left me off there. They kept me there 5 days, and finally they got a small plane to fly me back over to England to my air base. And that's how I got back, and then I flew 37 more missions after that. Not any more than beforehand. I was always a little nervous going over, but once I get over there and got into combat, all fear left. You didn't have any fear when you were flying combat. Just hoping to get the Germans instead of them getting you. Like I say, I had, every time I fired the guns, they fired. And every time I took off with the plane, I took it all the way around and back and landed in the home base. Anything you saw moving, a convoy, a boat on the rivers, somebody marching. We had to be careful about that though, because most of our prisoners of war, wherever they went, they marched. They didn't get any rides anywhere. So we didn't do too much of that. Just targets of opportunity that we clobbered. For instance, train engines. I destroyed 4 train engines, and I could tell you about each one, but I'll tell you about the third one. The first one we try to shoot where the fireman and the engineer are. We shot that little cabin, and then the engine all the way along. Steam come out and went up twice as high as the engine. And then you knew they were just going to go down the road a little ways and die. Well, the second one, the same thing. The third one, just as I was ready to shoot the place where the engineer and the fireman were, they jumped out and rolled down the bank in front of me. And I didn't get to shoot them at all. But I did shoot their engine, and it blew off the steam too. Well, I was escorting my bombers. They were B-17, and there was about 6 of them in the area I was escorting. And a Messerschmitt 262 came up in front of the leading plane and hit him head on, and then went up over him. And I didn't know he was there till the Messerschmitt went up over top of it and up over our heads. And right away, as soon as I saw it, I broke formation and went after him. And I went up, and he rolled over. Well, as I went up, he flew through my windscreen, and I fired at him, and the tracer bullets went his way, but I didn't have the gun sight on him, and he went on around and went down, and I rolled over and went down after him, and I chased him, but he was getting further away from me all the time, and I chased him for quite a while. I thought, well, I can't catch him, but I can follow him, and when he goes to land, I'll get him in. Well, after a bit, I looked at the airspeed indicator, and it said I was doing 620 miles an hour. Wow! We were redlined at 550. So I cut the speed back right away, and I lost him. We were stationed 40 miles north of London. I went into a Red Cross billet down there, and I was shooting the pool with a bunch of other pilots, and one of them said, "Look out there!" And I looked out there, and a big old Rolls Royce pulled up out front, and the chauffeur got out and came around and opened the door, the back door on the sidewalk side, and out stepped Queen Mary, Princess Elizabeth, and Princess Margaret. And they come in the billet and came around and shook hands with every one of us pilots and thanked us for what we were doing for England. I got to shake hands with the past Queen and the present Queen, Queen Elizabeth. She was about 18 years old then. She was a pretty lady. And she was about 18, I was about 20, maybe 23 by that time, I don't know, 22, 23. And she was very interesting. I was flying combat that day. The day before that, my squadron commander, Owen G. Rigetti, the same guy I was talking about, he was shot down strafing. I don't know where. I was in the air at the time. And he crash landed, but it was in June, just before the end of the war. And when he crash landed, his scoop caught and threw him up. He broke his nose on the gun sight. He called up and told us, he said, "Well, I'm down okay, but I think I broke my nose on the gun sight." But he says, "You guys, I'm all right, but you guys go ahead and keep up the good work." See, the war hadn't ended yet, the day before. And some civilians got a hold of him and hung him. We found that out after the war. Terrible, terrible thing. Queen Mary took us 5 days, or less than 5 days to get there, 4 days and a night, 2 nights. And I come home on a Victory ship. It took 14 days, and they come over North Atlantic, and the front end would go up in the air, and then boom, down. Almost everybody got sick on board. I didn't. I never got sick flying. I never got sick on the ship. But I'd go to eat a meal, and there'd only be 2 or 3 guys at the table. Everybody was sick, vomiting all over the place. And when the front end went down in the water, the back end would come up out and go brrrr, back in the water, and then the front end would go, bam, it would go. It was noisy. So it was so rough that they finally took it 20 or 30 miles south in the ocean to finish the trip over. Oh, it wasn't good, that's for sure. We'd think about it. When I first got there, the night I went in by train and got there and went into the barracks where I was going to stay, the 3 guys that were in there said, "Well, help yourself to the bunks." He said, "We lost 5 guys last week, so you can take your pick." So that's the welcome I got when I got there. Sure. Sure thought about it. They lost 5 guys in a week right out of that barracks. We did have heavy losses. We did. I'll tell you, it was the Lord that brought me through all of it. I know that. But I don't know what I'd just say that war is hell. That's all I could tell you. Because it is. You see a plane going down. You see a bomber. I'd see bombers going down, especially B-24s. They couldn't stay up like the B-17 could. I saw 3 B-24s go down one day. First one went spinning like that, and nobody come out of it. Another one rolled over and went down backwards like that. And the other one was out further in front of me, and I saw some parachutes come out of it. 10 guys on, there's 10, 20, 30 guys that were lost except the 3 that parachuted. It's just something that war is awful. That's all there is to it. I wanted to come home and get married. And we've been married 67 years.
That part's incredible.
It's great. It's been a good life, good wife, and a good life.